So a lot of the information out there about the magical, ritual virtues of the plant spirits is pretty reductionist. It's pretty watered down, right? We get these lists of, here are all of the herbs that are good for protection. Here are all of the herbs you can use for a love spell. So in this video, I want to explore how we can go deeper into our exploration of the magical virtues of the plants. In the midst of this herbal renaissance that we're going through, where suddenly everybody is in love with the plants, which is fantastic, we're seeing a huge amount of information flood the internet, flood the bookstores about how to work with the plants. And there's an issue that you've probably heard me talk about before that we see in both herbal medicine, herbalism, and herbal magic, or plant sorcery, or plant craft, however you want to define those two paths. And that issue is that most, not all, but pretty close to all of the material that's out there is super reductionist and non-animistic in nature, which, you know, I think for some people is where they're at. It's what they can understand. It's what they're willing to work with. It's how most of us have been conditioned in a very capitalist society to think in terms of what an object or a person is good for, what they can do for us, how they can be used, how their power can become our power. And we see this echoed over and over and over again in the way that people are approaching herbalism right now. That books about herbalism look at lists of herbs and what they're good for. These herbs are good for digestion. These herbs are good for the respiratory system. These herbs are good for protection. These herbs are good for cleansing. These are good for love magic, right? And so we're getting these really cursory lists of a giant umbrella topic like digestion, and we're cramming, 30 herbs into a list and saying, hey, all of these herbs are good for digestion. Pick any random one and take it. All your digestive woes will be solved. No, no, that's not how this works. There are nuances, nuances upon nuances upon nuances. Because the plants are persons, we can talk about a group of plants all having an affinity or an influence on the digestive system, but the way each one of them will work on the actual digestive system of an individual human person will be completely different. We see in herbal medicine all the time that folks will look up herbs that are good for a body system, let's say the lungs, right? And they will take that herb for a few weeks and find that their respiratory woes get worse. They become deeper, they become more pronounced, the symptoms get more intense, but they're taking the herb that the book says should be fixing the issue. So the problem lies in the fact that the herb is good for the lungs, does have an affinity for the lungs, and moves into the lungs, but it's the wrong personality. It's the wrong kind of energetic for the specific issue that person has going on. So we see this reflected as well in herbal magic now, that most of the books that you crack open that look at herb magic, herb spells, doing herbal witchcraft, herbal charms, all of that stuff, just list out herbs that are good for a really big topic. And it generally doesn't work as well as it could. There's some efficacy that I think is really important to acknowledge, that even when we don't choose the most right herb, we generally still see some movement in a good direction, especially magically, less likely in a health way because it's being ingested. But we can do better, right? We can go deeper into our relationship with the plant spirits, with our understanding of their nuances. And when we call on a plant spirit for protection, understanding how that individual plant spirit is going to bring protection. What is it they're going to do to offer protection? When this plant spirit shows up in a protective or defensive way, what does that look like? How does that unfold? And does that work with our personality, or does that work with our particular needs? So how do we figure this all out, right? How do we learn which herbs to call in for our magical pursuits, our various ritualistic, transformative workings. And I think the best place to start is with herbal medicine, okay? So there are more good books on herbalism than there are good books on herbal magic. And it tends to be the medicinal virtues of the plants that are passed on generation after generation because they're so preservative, they keep us alive and well. And so we tend to protect this lore, this empirical evidence, this tradition, more sometimes than we do our herbal traditions. So what I like to do, turn to an exceptional book on herbalism, a book that doesn't just list out these herbs are good for this illness. That's not herbalism. That's memorizing broad characteristics about plants that may or may not even be effective depending on the person's body that those herbs are being introduced to. I'm saying look at really good herbalism books that explore the personalities, the energetics, the temperaments, the constitutions, the directions, the movements of the plant persons. I will leave you some really good resources in the comments if you don't have any of these books in your possession. The reason for this is when we look at herbs for the digestion, we have to activate our sorceress vision, right? And we have to say, now, if the medicine that this particular herb is bringing to my digestive system right now were applied to the fullness of my life path, what would it look like? Okay, so if you are feeling food stagnation, you eat food, it sits in your belly, it doesn't move, you're unable to process it, you're not breaking it down, you're not extracting the nutrients from it and expelling the waste, what would it look like if that same process was happening externally in your life path, in your narrative, which is where we generally apply herbal magic, right? Maybe we would say, I'm having a hard time processing a situation or figuring out what in this situation is nourishing for me and what is waste, what I need to keep and protect and what I need to let go of, right? So maybe we'll turn to one of these herbs for digestion to help sort that issue out in our life, because the herbs, the plants, are not limited to where they can apply their medicine or their magic. This is one of the deep core aspects of the spiritual herbalism that I practice and teach. Herbal medicine does not stop at the end of your skin. That is a false notion. It makes no sense, and it doesn't work. It's not how we see plant medicine happen. When you work with plant medicine, that medicine influences whatever aspects of your life you open up to the plant medicine influencing, right? So this is where the herbal magic comes in. Medicine tends to be internal, magic tends to be external. What we talk about on this channel and my books over and over again is that medicine and magic are the same thing. The false boundary that we have erected between them is imposed by the power structures that be. It is not real, and it will do you a great service in your work with the plant spirits to rip that wall down. So we can look at a need for protection, somebody feeling that they need to do some warding work or some protecting work, and say, so if I were to crack open a book on herbalism, what would that body process look like? Maybe you're going to look at herbs for the integumentary system, your skin, right? Your boundary, your border, the part of you that keeps what's not you out and what is you in. So maybe that's the angle you're going for, right? A good boundary. Then we will look at herbs for the skin, herbs that have an influence on and a connection with the skin in that herbal book. Read about them, explore their energetics, their deeper personality, and see if any of them feel like a good match for us to work with more magically, more ritually. Maybe the protective work you're looking at is specific. You've actually got someone or something causing you problems. You have some malefic influence in the form of a neighbor or a coworker or whatever that is causing you disharmony, right? So maybe we're going to look at herbs for the immune system. Which herbs have an influence on our ability to fight off invading pathogens, to identify what is causing a problem, what is causing chaos within the body system, and eradicate it, right? However that may be. So maybe we're working with immune system herbs for protection. Kind of cool, right? So this is where we're going. Let's do one more. Maybe you are working on issues of love and relationships. Maybe calling a new relationship into your life or healing a relationship that's become stagnant. It may not shock you that the herbs that I think about working for love are also the herbs that I think about working with when it comes to cardiovascular and heart health, right? This makes sense. So maybe if a relationship has become stagnant, people have kind of frozen up, things have become cold, and folks are in a rut and things are repetitive. There's not a lot of movement or warmth, deep love or kindness or intimacy in a relationship. There's frigidity, right? Maybe we would want to bring in a warm, slightly stimulating, cardiovascular influencing blood mover, right? So this is an herb that when taken internally is going to warm and moisten the blood, increase the openness of the peripheral cardiovascular system so blood can flow more easily to all parts of the being, tone the heart, and just move things, get the blood moving. Maybe the blood has become sluggish or stagnant, arteries or capillaries are constricted. And so if we take that same energetic, that same expression, and apply it from internal to external, we can see how that same herb is going to come into a relationship when properly ritually applied, when applied properly in our magical workings, and do the same thing. It's going to start opening the heart, moving the way that heart energy flows from one person to another, from one person into a space, right? So this is very intuitive, but the beautiful thing is we get to lean into the plant lore that we have that has survived from our deepest ancestors. We get to look at the plants that have been showing up since the beginning over and over again reliably to help us address these very specific, very nuanced issues in our internal world and think about what it looks like to turn those virtues from inside to outside, because that's all this is. And with a few rounds of practice in this work, that wall that I talked about earlier that separates the medicinal from the magical, when we're talking about spiritual medicine and spiritual magic, sorceress wellness, that wall naturally crumbles because it no longer makes sense. The belief systems, the patterns that we have in place right now that tell us physical, mental, and emotional healing and the magical arts are two different expressions of wellness. Maybe we see them as two sides of one coin. Maybe we see them as somewhat related in one way or another, but we are still differentiating them. And really, the goal of my work is about not differentiating them all. They're not two sides of one coin, they're one coin, right? They're one expression of the infinite gifts that we receive from our plant spirit allies, from the green realm itself. So, check out the info below. I'm going to give you some different book suggestions, and that's a good place to start. Also, before we wrap up, let me remind you that you are capable of entering into deep personal sorceress relationships with the plant spirits and their guardians, plant spirits individually and the plant spirits all. And what that means is that the plants who taught the people, who wrote the books that have been handed down since time immemorial over and over again and ended up in your hands, the books that I'm going to post in the comments below, the information that survived that led to somebody writing it down and turning it into a book, the plants that taught those people can teach you. There's nothing that those people had that we don't have. There's no sense in fetishizing or romanticizing the ancient past. Yes, we love empirical evidence because when something works, we hand it on to our progeny, and it works for them, and they hand it on, and it works for them, and they hand it on, and so on and so forth. And it becomes very clear that this is a relationship that we can lean into and trust. But everything that's old was once new. And so please don't fall into the trap of believing that because it's in a book, somehow it's superior to your experience with a plant spirit. What the plants teach you with your devotion, your dedication, your time spent sitting with them, learning about them, journeying with them, doing ritual with them means more to you as an individual person than anything that's broad spectrum that you will read from a book. We always want to run what we get through the filter of safe, sane, and consensual, obviously. But 20 plus years into this work, I've never seen a plant show up for somebody in journey or in ritual and advise them to do something unethical or unsafe. We generally come into this work with an awareness that we need to know which plants are poison plants. We need to know which plants are safe, for use during pregnancy and breastfeeding and all that stuff. And oftentimes when it comes to magical work, we're not ingesting them, so it doesn't matter. We're working with them in a ritual context through their personality, less about the chemistry of taking them within. So it's a moot point. So the real root of exploring the magical virtues, the magical blessings and gifts of the plant spirits is by you creating deep relationship with them and allowing them to teach you directly how they want to work with you as an individual. And this is another part that gets sticky, that when we get a teaching from a plant spirit, when they show up in our dreams or we meditate with them and have a vision or a feeling or synchronicity, we get really excited and we forget that that is for us. It is for us. It's sacred and it is meant for us and our work and who we are as individuals, because we also have our own set of virtues that we bring into the world. If a plant spirit tells you to work with them for a specific purpose that doesn't align to what's in most of the books, because it's usually just authors repeating each other, it doesn't mean that it's holy writ. It doesn't mean that everybody who's not working with that plant is wrong, or that what you got needs to be added to every monograph, Materia, Medica, and grimoire in existence. No. The cool part of green sorcery is that you are taught as an individual, and the way that one particular plant spirit can work with you might be quite unique for who you are. And this is something we have to hold sacred and dear and close to our hearts, and sometimes private. Sometimes these are tomes of wisdom that are locked up in our heart that come out only in service of our community, in the medicine we make, the magic we craft, the ritual we perform, without a lot of pomp and circumstance, because it's unnecessary. So, books being used to open a gateway to the deeper expressions of the plant spirits and personal relationship. This is where the seed hits the soil, where the real work starts, and we're learning directly from the plant spirits. And we hold both of these, the lore and the gnosis, right? One in each hand, always connecting and merging in the center into one expression of our plant spirit sorcery. So hopefully that's helpful. Check out the books. Let me know if you have any books that you love on this particular topic, and I will see you next time. If you find this work valuable and you would like to go deeper into your own personal work with the plant spirits, I invite you to contribute to the work that I'm doing by joining me over on Patreon. We have a full calendar every single month of courses, classes, articles, exclusive content that is only offered to folks who are part of that group. So come on over, see what we're up to. I would very much love your support, and I would love to engage with you more directly in your work with the plant spirits.